Hello, my name is Dennis McGee, and I'm here with you for an hour on this program, Prophecy for the Last Hour. And we're here to talk about the end of time, or the end of the days and leading up to the return of Christ. It's not the end of the world we're talking about. It's the end of the world as we know it, under the almost like the mist of evil that plagues the world and has plagued the world for 6,000 years. There have always been wars and evil and hatred and injustice going on. We look forward to the hope and the promise of a day where goodness will abound and justice abounds and truth abounds. There's a prophecy in the book of Isaiah that talks about the Messiah coming, and it says the government will be on his shoulders, and he will teach the nations no longer to war. They will turn their weapons into plowshares. So imagine a time where the fear that grips the world, where everyone is sort of watching out for the other nation and watching out for the other empire to develop and grow and all the bad things that are going on, to know that there's a hope for peace and lasting peace that will abide forever. And that's kind of what this program is about. I'd like to start out, though, in Luke 21. Jesus was talking to his disciples on the Mount of Olives, and he was describing the times that he would be returning and the events leading up to it. And he said there would be a time of great tribulation, a time of great stress. He said nation would rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. That means there would be a world war going on. There would be great earthquakes, famines and pestilences in various places, and fearful events and great signs from heaven. We're already starting to see a lot of these things develop, and like increase of earthquakes, increase of famines, crazy weather patterns, extreme weather, fearful events going on, great signs from heaven. I give you one example would be the blood moons that are happening right now. If you're watching this program live, you know that tonight is a full moon, and if you go out and look at the full moon, it's white. It's a nice big white full moon. Well, in a month from now, if you go out and if the sky is clear and you look at the full moon, and it's going to be red. It's going to be what they call a blood moon, which is a result of a lunar eclipse. Now, these happen regularly, so there's nothing remarkable about a blood moon per se, except that this blood moon is part of a tetrad of 4 blood moons that are taking place on Jewish feast days in 2014 and 2015. And there was one that took place back in the spring on Passover, and the next one is going to happen in the first week of October on the Feast of Tabernacles. And next year, again on Passover, the first day of Passover, and again next year, the first day of Tabernacles. You're going to have these 4 blood moons all lined up. There's a book out on the subject by Mark Biltz, who is a Messianic rabbi from Oregon, and he describes and talks about the blood moons as a sign to Israel and a sign to us of impending judgment, impending events happening. So great signs from heaven is what Jesus talked about. And he goes on to say, when you see Jerusalem being surrounded by armies, you will know that its desolation is near. And let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let those in the city get out, and let those in the country not enter the city. For that is a time of punishment and fulfillment of all that has been written. There's a lot in the Bible that's been written about these last days. There was a lot that was written about the first coming of the Messiah. And there's even more written about the second coming of the Messiah. And we're going to get into some of that tonight. And but he said there would be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars, And on the earth, nations will be in anguish and perplexity at the roaring and the tossing of the sea. Now, one of the signs of the second coming is the fact that we would have these extreme weather patterns that create great waves, hurricanes, tsunamis, and this, that, and the other. And I want to talk about those because they come into play with some of the things that are written in the book of Daniel. And I'd like to go to Daniel. It's one of my favorite books. It's one of the key books on Bible prophecy. And we're going to start off in chapter 7. Daniel is a sealed book. It said it was Daniel, in his prophecies, said that they were sealed till the time of the end. And there have been many over the centuries who've tried to kind of break the code on the book of Daniel and have had not a lot of success doing it. One of those was Sir Isaac Newton, the great scientist who discovered gravity, one of the greatest scientists of all time, and yet he had a passionate interest in the book of Daniel. Yet if you read his writings or commentaries about what he did, he didn't seem to do very well. He did a lot better with science. But I would like to go to chapter 7 of Daniel. And he said, in my vision at night I looked, and there before me were 4 winds of heaven churning up the great sea. 4 great beasts, each different from the other, came up out of the sea. The first was like a lion, and it had the wings of an eagle. I watched until its wings were torn off, and it was lifted from the ground so that it stood on 2 feet like a man, and the heart of a man was given to it. And there before me was a second beast, which looked like a bear. It was raised up on one of its sides, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. It was told, get up and eat your fill of flesh. After that I looked, and there before me was another beast, one that looked like a leopard. And on its back it had 4 wings like those of a bird. This beast had 4 heads, and it was given authority to rule. After that in my vision at night I looked, and there before me was a 4th beast, terrifying and frightening and very powerful. It had large iron teeth. It crushed and devoured its victims. It trampled underfoot whatever it was left. It was different from all the former beasts, and it had 10 horns. And this final beast is described in other places as a dragon empire. So you got these 4 empires, and there's a lot been written about them. But I was studying Daniel about 20 years ago, and was pondering on one of the ways of interpreting this. And one way is to look at the lion and the bear and the leopard and the dragon as 4 modern empires that lead up to the coming of the second coming of Christ. The lion is described as having as standing on 2 feet like a human, and having the heart of a human and the wings of an eagle torn from its back. If you look at some of the modern empires that have developed in the last 500 years, the British Empire ruled for a very long period of time, for over 200 years, and the royal breastplate of Britain is a lion standing on 2 feet like a human. And as you know, humanism as a philosophy was promoted not by the Roman Empire, it was promoted by the British Empire. And I believe the eagle's wings that are torn from the back of the lion refer to America, the great eagle that broke away from Britain. And this will come in later on in the study. But so I think that was one of the very first uncoded mysteries of the book of Daniel, was the Revolutionary War. In reality, America had no way of winning that war. We were up against the greatest army in the world. At Valley Forge, our soldiers hardly had food to eat or shoes to wear. They were in disarray and dismay. But George Washington held fast and stood fast, and we somehow won that war. The British kind of gave up. And I think it was very significant because the eagle literally broke away from the lion, and that was the beginning of the downfall of this empire. Now, Daniel goes on to say that at the time of the fourth beast, that the other beasts had been stripped of their authority, but were allowed to live for a period of time. So the depiction of these empires that emerge in the time of the end are such that they aren't destroyed, they aren't broken up as an empire per se, they just lose their authority. They lose their governing authority. And the second beast that arises is a bear that is very aggressive. And if you think about what empire in modern history was described as a bear, it would be the Soviet Union. Well, the Soviet Union began to emerge after World War II. And it was just after World War II that I believe that Britain really began to lose its governing authority over other nations. The debt ratio of Britain to its GDP, gross domestic product, was over 200%. We talk about, it was actually 250%, the debt ratio to GDP. It left their economy unsustainable. So the lion begins to weaken and the bear emerges, and it's a very aggressive bear. Well, I was studying this in 1990. That was the year that the Soviet Union collapsed. And like Britain, it collapsed not from military defeat, but through economic collapse. The British rupee just fell apart. And you had three breakaway republics right off the bat: Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. And the Soviet bear growled at these three countries, but they stood their ground, and they broke away, and it led to the dissolving of the whole Soviet Union. Well, and Daniel describes the bear as having three ribs in its mouth as it's rolling over on its side. And I believe when it says it's rolling over on its side, it's kind of going into hibernation. So it is about that time that the third empire should emerge, which is described as a leopard having four wings. Well, I was at the local library in '91, and I was reading books about history and prophecy and the like, and to my amazement, I went over to the magazine section, and there was a picture, and I have a copy of it, of an electronic engineering magazine that had a leopard on the cover. And I was like, it's describing Asia power. And the article that's written on there says how Japan and her four tigers are exploiting electrotechnology to create a tripolar world economic structure by the end of the decade. And I'm going like, there's your leopard with four wings right there. It's called Japan and her four tigers, who were Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, and South Korea. And the article goes on to describe how at that time in '91, they had double the domestic economic growth of any nation in the world, including the industrialized nations. I don't know if I can put this down now, but Japan and her four tigers were emerging, and it was driven by electronics, the electronic revolution, all these games like Nintendo that were coming out, and the computer programs, and the video games, and all the new technology in automobiles. This was all driven by the dot-com revolution coming out of Asia and Japan. And it says here in Daniel that authority would be given to the leopard. The leopard didn't have to fight for its authority like the Soviet Union or the bear or the lion had to. It was just given. It was just sort of laid in its lap. It was like all the nations in the industrialized world were suddenly buying products that had electronic chips in them and the like. And it still goes on today with the texting and the cell phones and all of this type of thing. But Daniel says that the leopard, the third beast, would weaken. And there were signs of that early on at the turn of the century, with the bursting of the dot-com bubble. There were signs of Japan losing some of its economic clout. But then something happened in 2011 that really caused this Asia power to diminish. And that was the tsunami that hit Japan. This great tsunami happened. And again, we go back to what Jesus said would be one of the signs of the time, would be the nations would be perplexed at the roaring and the tossing of the waves. Well, there was and there would be earthquakes in diverse places. There was an underground earthquake. It led to a tsunami, and it wiped through the shoreline of Japan, and it took out or disabled 3 to 4 nuclear power plants in Japan. And this has been an ongoing at Fukushima and in that location of Japan, right along the shore. They have not been able to completely contain these power plants. They're constantly having to pour water into the plants to keep them cool, and they have to dump the water out into the Pacific Ocean. And already, just since this happened in the last 3 or 4 years, there's been all kinds of reports upon the Pacific coastline of sea animals washing up on shore in large numbers, and some people are saying that the Pacific Ocean is dying. A lot of people don't want to eat the fish or the seafood that comes from the West Coast because of all the radiation that's been floating from Japan toward the United States. But this has had an economic impact on Japan. They've had to administer rolling blackouts in many of their factories and their plants, their manufacturing plants. And economically, this has taken a huge toll to where Japan is now the highest indebted nation in the world, with a debt load of 200% to its gross domestic product. So what happened to the lion happened to the bear, and it's happening to the leopard. So I believe that this tsunami is one of the great significant signs that the time is near. So is it coincidental that we got these 4 blood moons happening right now, and that the world is in economic turmoil and depression? But the 4th beast that rises up is known as the dragon, and it is the beast of the Antichrist. It is the final beast. In the book of Revelation, the dragon is described as having 7 heads and 10 horns. It has the body of a leopard, the mouth of a lion, and the feet of a bear. So basically, it is incorporated in these former empires. Now, the book of Revelation also talks about the eagle, but the eagle seems to be acting separate from the dragon, the lion, the bear, and the leopard. The eagle is coming to the defense of God's remnant people in Judea, because Jesus said, "Let those in Judea run for the hills." In the book of Revelation, it talks about the dragon pursuing the woman who gave birth to the man-child and to her offspring. The woman who gave birth to the man-child refers to Mary giving birth to Jesus, and the offspring of the nation that she represents, which is Israel. It talks about, Jesus said, let those in Judea run for the hills. It talks about a remnant being taken on the 2 wings of a great eagle to a place that is out of the reach of the dragon's kingdom. And it's been my belief over the years that the eagle has yet to see its greatest hour, that we were called as a nation for a purpose to defend and protect the remnant people during the time of the Great Tribulation. Because it's a time when Satan, who is the evil one, knows that his time is short, because he knows that Christ is returning, and he came the first time. Jesus came the first time as a lamb, but he's coming the second time as the great Lion of Judah, and he will judge the nations, and he will put an end to all this insanity and injustice and immorality and all these things that are going on, that are just making the world a deadlier place. He will restore paradise to the earth. There are all kinds of promises in the Bible about the 1,000-year millennium of peace in which he reigns from Jerusalem, and it's during that time that the lion shall lay down with the lamb, the rose will bloom in the desert, the child will play with the snake. This would even suggest that the aggressive nature of animals will cease, that just the whole sense, the atmosphere of violence and aggression will end, and the world will be literally in a blissful state, because in Revelation it says that Satan will be bound for that 1,000 years. So we have all these hopes and promises in the Bible, written by the prophets of old, of the second coming. But part of what he does, and it's written in Daniel, it's written in Thessalonians, it's written in Revelation, it's written in Isaiah, is that he will defeat the leader of the land of wickedness. He will defeat the one who rides the beast. And the final beast, like I said, is a dragon that has 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, some people have tried to describe the dragon as being China, because China is known to be called as a dragon. I don't agree with that, because China basically is part of the Asia powers with Hong Kong and Singapore and Taiwan. There is a nation that is associated with a dragon, and that was Babylon. That was what we would call today Iraq. I believe this is the land of Babylon, and in Revelation it says that the city of Babylon will rule over the kings of the earth in the end of time. So this is the major metropolis or city or region in which the Antichrist emerges from. And Isaiah describes Babylon as a place in the desert where Arabs pitch their tents. In Revelation, John is told to go into the wilderness or into the desert to witness the rise of Babylon. Now, there's a prophecy that I've really hung on to, and it's rarely mentioned in prophecy circles, because so many of the commentators believe that this was already fulfilled. Because you see, ancient Babylon was used as a tool of judgment against Israel when Israel rebelled against the laws of God and against the laws of Jubilee and the laws of Shemitah that you can read about in Leviticus. And Israel would not let their slaves go free. And as a result, Jeremiah the prophet declared that Israel would serve Babylon for 70 years as a punishment for having refused to abide by the laws that Moses had given to them, the laws of Jubilee. And this was actually carried out. But it says in the book of Revelation that Babylon is going to reemerge. It's a beast that once was, now is not, but then shall come again. It's how Revelation describes it. It is a city that in which all the nations of the earth are drunk with the wine of her fornications. And so you could say, well, how could that be? Well, the religion of ancient Babylon was magic, and all nations have participated in magic. I mean, you know, horoscopes and sorceries and witchcraft and all these kind of religions that have emerged draw their roots back to ancient Babylon. and that's where that emerged from. And Babylon will be judged in the end. But let's go to Habakkuk, and in chapter 1, the prophet writes, "Look at the nations and watch and be utterly amazed, for I'm going to do something in your days that you would not believe, even if you were told. I am raising up the Babylonians, that ruthless and impetuous people who sweep across the whole earth to seize dwelling places not their own. They are a feared and dreaded people. They are a law to themselves, and they promote their own honor. Their hordes advance like a desert wind and gather prisoners like sand. They deride kings and scoff at rulers." It says, "O Lord, you have appointed them to execute judgment. You have ordained them to punish." So here's a depiction of a horde of advancing like a desert wind in the land of Babylon. And today we're seeing a sign of that, I believe, with the problems going on in Iraq with this group called ISIS. They're advancing like a desert wind. They just kind of blow into towns, and they deride kings and rulers. It says here they come bent on violence. They gather prisoners like sand. They behead people, which is one of the signs the book of Revelation mentions. It talks about the saints that are beheaded. It says they are a ruthless, impetuous people. They sweep across the whole earth. Now, how could that be? Well, it's turning out that one of the concerns that our government has is that a lot of these militant recruits are coming from Europe and even some from America and have passports, and they're therefore able to sweep across the whole earth. And it says here they will seize dwelling places not their own. They are a feared and dreaded people. That means they're a terrorist people. They are a law to themselves. That means they're an outlaw. They don't abide by international law. And they just do horrific things. Daniel says that in the time of the end, it will be a time when rebels have become completely wicked. And I can't think of anything more wicked than what's going on in some of these places in Iraq right now, and how they're forcing people to accept their form of Islam. Now, there are peaceful Islams throughout the world who like to live in peace and abide under constitutional law. Like in our country, we have freedom of religion. Nobody's here saying you have to be a Christian, or you have to be a Jew, or you have to be a Muslim, or you have to be a Buddhist or an atheist. Nobody's forcing their religious beliefs on you. And we like it that way in our country. We call that a freedom. We call that one of our rights, the right to worship without reprisal. But that's not going on in certain parts of the world. Some of these militants are pushing a brand of what they call Sharia law that enforces and empowers a legal system that would, for one thing, require women to become pretty much second-class citizens. I just don't think that's going to fly in this country. But they claim that they want to fly the flag of ISIS and Sharia law over the White House. Well, I believe that we have a greater destiny, that we're the land of the eagle. We're the land that's going to stand and protect God's people through this coming time of crisis when we see the rise of Babylon happening all around us. And Habakkuk, and let me just say about Babylon, a lot of people think